Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for joining us here this morning for this ETC network. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Buckley and I'm auditor with the Southern Region Assembly. I'm head of the ETC First Level Control Unit for Ireland, Wales, Urbact, North West Europe, and for the Northern Periphery and Interreg Europe programme. We share the first level control function with our colleagues in the Northern Western Region Assembly in Ballydreen, and the controller there is Sharon Conway. The unit has 5 staff and just 4 clerical officer. And this morning I'm going to look at our presentation, claims for backup documentation. So, Karen, this slide isn't moving on there. Catherine, can you check there, please?
Yeah, Michael, we can see the slides moving on there. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's perfect. Thanks. Sorry, I just didn't seem to move. Okay, so I suppose when the project gets approved, and then obviously the first level control function has to come into play, our first point of contact, the JS, may send us an email with a list of projects that have been approved, or we may be contacted directly ourselves by the Irish partners or the lead partner of the project. And I suppose our starting point really from the project is that obviously to get an idea of what the project is about and the background and the partners, we look for a copy of the application form and the subsidy contract and the partnership agreement. And as you see there from the slide, there's a couple of different terminologies. Some programs call it subsidy contracts, others grant offer letter, and again, partnership cooperation agreement mean the same thing basically. And then if there's any sub partners involved in any of the projects, again, we look to see if there a service level agreement in terms of who's responsible for what, whatever between the responsible partner and sub partner throughout the duration of the project. So on next slide to move on there now. So I suppose basically when you're starting to organize your claims or whatever, like, you know, the first thing you need to do is, like, I suppose you need to, when preparing a claim for submission, you need to ask yourself, you know, the following questions, I suppose, in terms of how much will I be declaring, what expenditure will you be declaring, and in case what budget lines will you be declaring the expenditure under. Generally, when projects start off, they may just only have staff costs and travel and a bit of office and admin in the first claim or two, and then as the projects rank up and basically get into delivering the activities, you can see expenditure coming on and under other budget lines. Then moving on to my next slide there, declaring expenditure on the IT system. Sorry, I know the slides are a bit slow popping up there. Basically speaking, for declaring expenditure in the IT system, staff costs should be declared by staff member 1 entry per month or per period, basically. So if someone's paid on a monthly basis, you calculate their eligible staff costs for that particular month and you put that in the system, or if they're paid on a fortnightly basis, you calculate their staff costs and put those into the system as well. We had a case recently where a partner basically calculated staff costs for 6 months and came up with a bulk figure and put that into the claim, and that had to be the claim had to be reverted, and they had to break down that expenditure and declare it again for the entire 6 months. I suppose when reporting travel expenses on the IT system, ideally, if you're per travel claim, depending, I suppose, on your organisation's rules and procedures for travel, some organisations may process a claim when they come back from after travel. Some may only submit monthly travel claims to their IT people or whatever, basically to be processed for payment. I had a case there recently where one partner, they had a claim. Basically, there was 10 transactions on that claim. All 10 transactions were relating to one trip, and the entire trip is eligible. And yet they sat down in front of the ETC platform and inputted every single one of those transactions. Keep it simple. If the entire travel claim is eligible, put in the bulk figure, and obviously send us a copy of the travel claim and the backup documentation. We'll be able to follow the audit trail from that. For expertise and services, basically the expenditure will be declared by supplier invoice, and again, separate invoices put in there. And the equipment, again, item purchased, and for the invoice and for infrastructure works, again, invoices as they come in, and once they're paid, they should be declared under the various and the infrastructure works budget line under the various work packages. Just moving on there, the FLC check itself. Obviously, every project has to have a separate project account. It should be set up in your accounting system. So it's one of the questions that us as controllers have to respond to basically on the first level control system on the platforms is there a separate accounting system for the project, or is there a separate general ledger or accounting code on on a standard accounting system? So, I mean, generally, majority of the situations is that there's a normal ledger code set up on an existing accounting system, and all the project costs are posted to that. So basically, you need to get a printout from your job code. Expenditure charge to project each reporting period should be listed on the general ledger printout, and that includes salary costs. Sometimes with local authorities or with universities, the staff costs or the staff payroll is run. Basically, they're posted to other nominal codes or whatever for the departments or schools or whatever areas in the organisation. And the portion relating to the project then should ideally be journalised out and posted into the general ledger account for that project, because the general ledger account should be a mirror image of what the expenditure will basically be reported for your claim. So the FLC will validate transactions, as you see there on your general ledger, and again a full audit trail to be provided to enable us, the FLC, to trace the payments right through to the bank. So in terms of submissions, basically, sometimes like projects are under pressure, I know, to deliver the work package and their activities, but basically you should be always planning all the time from the start of a reporting period, get your information together, and after maybe 3 or 4 months of a reporting period, you could gather the first couple of months documentation for the claim, like a copy of your timesheets, you could copy of payment claims, or a copy of travel claims, copy of invoices. All the time when we're raising queries and claims, where partners come back and say, oh, we're waiting for finance to send us back a copy of our travel claim, or waiting for a copy of the invoice to come back for external expertise. All these, you could take a copy of all these yourself and keep them in your own section before you basically send them on to finance for payment. It's important basically to start planning all the time. That obviously the whole purpose of being involved in the project is to draw down the funding, and there's a process involved in drawing down the funding. You have to go through first level control, which is a compulsory check, and any expenditure that doesn't go through first level control won't be processed any further. So it's important to make sure that you're thinking all the time, even though you're organising your activities and delivering the project in the ground, that at the end of the day you will have to get your report together. So it's important to plan during your start of reporting period for gathering documentation. You need to ensure that all the supporting documentation is available. Just ensure obviously that there's a clear audit trail, basically for all transactions uploaded to the IT system. And obviously, again, as I said, when you print off your general ledger account, you need to check to ensure that all the expenditure is on that account, and that it ties in with what the figures that you're going to report on your platform. So basically, moving on to the next slide there. With uploading, that's what your transactions. You're gonna, I mean, for those of you that are familiar already and are used to sending claims in, like you are working on the IOLF system or the EMS system, you know the process involved in that in terms of uploading the transactions under each budget line and separate entries. When that is done, obviously, I mean, you need to email electronic copy version of the supporting documentation to us as soon as possible after submitting your claim online. I mean, the important thing is that obviously before we were getting hard copy documentation in, and we're now, given the current scenario, looking to move away from receiving hard copy documentation and creating hard copy files to an electronic system. And I know myself, some of the programs are planning. I was at an FLC workshop there back in January, and with the Interreg Europe program, and they're planning basically. There's a system being developed at the moment where all documentation will go on it at the point of entry, and at each level throughout the process. The FLC or lead partner or JS will be able to access that documentation and review any documents that are uploaded, and that's the way. And it's a lot of FLCs at these meetings was raising the point that, you know, they want everything electronically going forward because it's easier to get to that store and easier to get access to. So it's important to ensure that you gather all your documentation, and particularly if you I suppose are depending on other areas in your organization like finance or HR or whatever to give you an input into it, that you need to have those people on board as well. I suppose in the event that, I mean, claims don't come in, or somebody uploads a claim on this platform and submits it, but don't submit the hard copy or the soft copy documentation to us by email, maybe for a couple of weeks. Generally, we don't consider a claim to be submitted until such time as we received the figures on the portal, and we have basically received a soft copy of the documentation for processing. We had a case there quite recently where a partner put up a claim on the email system and submitted it online. They sent documentation, as they thought, to us at the end of July. They went off on leave for August, came back at the start of September. I was wondering where their claim was, and were on to us. We looked into it. It wasn't on our ETC register as being submitted. We checked back and we discovered that okay, there was figures put up on the system. They didn't submit the figures, and they didn't submit the soft copy documentation to the correct email. So therefore, we didn't actually receive the claim, and we didn't know a claim had been submitted, and they thought the claim was submitted. So, I mean, our process again is that when claims come in electronically, we ask all partners to send it to flc@southernassembly.ie. That email address is set up, and when an email comes to that address, it's bounced off 5 different emails in the organization. So somebody will get it and be able to process it. And basically, when the soft documentation comes into the organization, it's acknowledged, is upload. It's the details of the claim is put up on our ETC register, so we know the claim is in. And we sent an acknowledgement email to the partner to let them know that we've got the documentation. So that's the process. And then when controllers become available, a claim is assigned to the controller, and they're responsible for processing that claim. So that's basically the procedure. So again, just to point out there that the documentation needs to be sent to the FLC at Southern Assembly email address, and we don't consider a claim to be fully submitted until we've got the figures on the portal and we've got an electronic copy of the documentation to back up the claim. So we need those to come in to be sent into us in around the same time. We've had cases where we may get figures in on the portal, and we might get a claim, the documentation sent in for 2 or 3 weeks after. So we can't really start a claim until we have the soft copy documentation in at the same time as the claim is submitted on the system. So just moving on there, I'm going to look at common errors on the budget line. So a lot of you would be familiar with what the budget lines are and the regulations. So you have there your staff costs, office admin, travel, accommodation, equipment, infrastructure works, external expertise, and services. So I suppose we just look a quick look through some of these budget lines here and see what the common problems are. I mean, for staff costs, like the usual ones basically are that timesheets are now showing 100% of the time worked. Some staff are working on a couple of projects, and they're declaring fixed percentage for one project, and they're reporting hours on a timesheet for another project. If they're working on a number of projects, staff need to keep 100% timesheets and record their hours for each separate project. Again, some documentation may not be submitted for the report payroll costs. Obviously, payroll costs is a substantial part of your budget and costs to your organisation. So we need to be able to vouch those costs and know that the figures we're certifying are correct, and we need to base those on the likes of pay slips or payroll reports or whatever. So that documentation needs to be provided. Mission letters, again, you have situations where they're not basically reporting the percentage of time worked in the project, or they're not reporting the roles or responsibilities in relation to the employees. And there may be scenarios where maybe, for argument's sake, employer's PRSI is not included in costs, or costs are omitted, or errors are occurred, or whatever on that. I suppose just moving on to office and administration costs there. Again, office and administration costs is a flat rate, 15% of staff costs, so there's no requirement for an audit trail for that. But what we do find is that we see situations where common errors might be that costs that would fall under the office and administration costs, that are office and admin related, communication costs, etc., actually are declared and reported under external expertise and services. So you need to be familiar. If you look at your program manuals, you'll see an itemized list of all the costs that are eligible under each budget line. And if costs fall under the office admin, even though you've actually incurred the costs and paid out, and there's a proof of payment and audit trail for it, if it comes under office administration, there's no need to basically provide an audit trail, and therefore the cost is covered by the 15%, and you don't need to declare it on the system. Moving on to travel, and the travel and accommodation should pop up there now. budget line. The common errors are you have travel costs declared for, so you could have external expertise, basically someone that's external to the organisation that you incur travel costs. You may take them to a meeting or a partner meeting, whatever. They're declared under the travel and accommodation budget line, and they should be declared under the basically the external expertise budget line. The only travel costs to be declared under travel and accommodation budget line are the travel costs for the staff of the partner organisation. So if you're a local authority and a section in your local authority with 3 staff working on a project and they travel to project meetings or whatever, it's only their costs basically are eligible to be declared under the travel and accommodation budget line. If you bring in a sub-partner, or if you bring in an associate or kind of an expertise or an observer or whatever, and they attend some of these meetings or whatever, their travel costs are to be declared under the external expertise and services budget line. Some of the other problems we have is, again, with receipts, there's no official receipts available, taxis, tolls, bus fares. I know people tend to lose them or whatever, but you need to make sure that you have to support the costs, and you have to demonstrate an audit trail for the costs. So you need to make sure you retain those. I've seen in second level audits where even though the amounts are minuscule, second level auditors have recommended taking out costs because there's no receipt there to back up the figures. Copy of travel claims mightn't be submitted. Travel paid outside the reporting period. That's something again to be mindful of, whatever, like that the cost has been incurred within and paid within the reporting period, and particularly we home in that towards the end of the project, when the project is finishing up, that all your costs have to be paid. Normally projects are due to finish up about 3 months before the official end date, and therefore all the costs will need to be processed and paid and through the bank before the 3 months are up. No evidence of approval for travel outside the programme area. We had a case recently where a partner attended a workshop. It was outside the programme area, but it was in the European Union, and they didn't apply to the JS for approval at the time via the lead partner, and I decided to leave it go through at the time on the claim. I mean, because it wasn't very far outside the programme area of the particular programme, but the JS had come back and recommended that cost be removed, and that cost amounted to 1,500 quid for travel costs. So you need to be sure that if you're travelling outside your programme area for any events whatsoever, that you get prior approval from the JS, and most programmes have particular forms that have to be filled in and submitted to JS seeking approval. Other problems that we have, again, you must have evidence that the meetings and events have taken place, so we're looking for agendas and sign-in sheets and so forth. Again, other areas where the credit card, okay, is used as a good audit trail or whatever, like it can't be the only audit trail for invoices. As I said, we need to have copies of receipts and invoices. If they're paid by the credit card, that's fine, but we have situations where credit cards are produced as the only source of audit evidence, and we have to make a judgment call on that. So you need to have your receipts, and we need to have proof of payment. Again, situations where conference fees and registration fees, a lot of, particularly maybe the likes of universities, we've come across that quite regularly, where the individual or staff members will pay the cost of the conference fee or registration fees themselves, and then claim it back through your travel and accommodation or travel system or whatever, and it goes in as part of a travel claim. And then when someone is going through the claims or whatever, the whole lot is put into travel and accommodation and claimed under that budget line. So in that situation, basically conference fees and registration fees, even if they're claimed through your travel system, they have to be reported separately under the external expertise and services budget line. The last one there I highlighted, travel expenses declared for individuals who were unable to attend for unforeseen circumstances. That came up on a second level audit there last year, where 2 staff members in a partner for medical reasons were unable to basically attend a particular event, and the second level auditor has deemed those costs to be ineligible. So that's something that we have to watch, and that you as your project partner have to watch that. If you book in advance, maybe a couple of weeks or a couple of months in advance, basically flights and accommodation, and I know now, given the current economic environment or whatever, travel costs are pretty low, and even we're seeing that now coming in some of the claims there for the first 6 months of this year, and for partners that may be reporting 5,000 or 6,000 or maybe 10,000 and travel costs, whatever, 1,500 quid or €1,000 or whatever, and some of them whatever. So the important thing is that when you're planning ahead, you meet the individuals that are going to travel to these events, that they're aware that for any reason that they have to cancel, they have to notify the partner immediately, or notify their line manager immediately, and every effort must be made basically to recoup those costs, or maybe to assign some other individual that can attend instead of the person that can't attend. And that's something that you need to be aware of all the time, that and if that's the case, if someone can't attend or whatever, those costs can't be claimed basically. So just moving on into our external expertise and services areas there. Again, just some similar ones there. You have situations for expertise where, say, partner meals might be declared under travel, but their accommodations under expertise and services. Any travel costs associated with an external expert that's incurred has to be processed under the external expertise and services budget line. Some cases you find where there might be no link or very little link for the expertise costs that are declared. Again, the usual evidence of proof of payments omitted. Tendering, I mean, procurement is a big area, and if you're working in local authority or in university and any of these agencies, you should be well aware of the requirements for public procurement procedures and the rules and regulations around that. It's very important. We need to have a full audit trail from start to finish, and obviously the greater the value of the contract, the more intense the tender process will be. The big area that the Commission look into, and again, there's penalties that can be imposed. And just to give you an example, there on the Northwest Europe programme, they recommended 25% correction on expenditure. So if there's an incomplete tender process and you declare an item expenditure, that can be subject to a 25% reduction straight away. So you see some of the other bits there that are covered, like split contracts, valuation assessment, tenders not provided, or contracts above the threshold not advertised, and e-tenders. I mean, sometimes you need to make sure that every effort is made to publicise your contract, and we always recommend that you should advertise it on e-tenders, even if there's only one supplier. At least you're covered in terms of your procurement process. You put it up on the e-tenders. They're subject to the thresholds now, obviously, like, you know, if it's over 25,000, you can stick it up on e-tenders, and basically you'll have an audit trail for that process then. Just moving on to equipment, some of the areas in equipment there, maybe not used solely for the purpose of the project. Again, it could be procurement process not carried out. Equipment could be purchased towards the end of the project. If it's a core asset, the full cost will be lowered. If it's not a core asset, then depreciation rules will kick in there, and again, you'll have to look at that in terms of the and obviously, generally speaking, that in terms of planning for your project, normally a lot of equipment will be purchased maybe at the start of the project or into the first 12 months. But any equipment that would purchase close to the end date, there would have to be a very valid reason for it. And if it's a core asset and if it is meant to be purchased and delivered in that particular semester, that's fine. But I mean, it's an area that we do look at, and the JS do look at as well. You know? So other areas that we've come across difficulties with when equipment might be available when we go out and spot check or whatever. No, that could be just for genuine reason that someone might be available, or if it's a laptop or whatever, or bits and pieces like that. So again, generally speaking, we do look to see if there is a substantial investment in equipment. We would do an on-site to see, obviously look at the record books and records and the audit trail, but also to physically examine the bits of equipment that were purchased to see that they exist and that they're doing exactly what they were intended, the intended purpose. Depreciation policy not applied, and again, invoices not paid outside the common areas. The next few slides there on the audit trail there, they're fairly self-explanatory. I'll just have a quick flick through those because I think I'm under time pressure there. Again, lots of symbols in there, are fairly self-explanatory with staff costs, the audit trail required. You can see there your contracts, mission letters, gross net printouts, timesheets, pay slips, for the office administration. Again, as I said, it's a flat rate, 15%, so there's no requirement to supply any documentation for that. Your travel and accommodation costs, again, you can see there what's required. As I said already, your invoices, agendas, sign-in sheets, proof of payment, possibly compliance with your whatever your organizational rules are in terms of travel and your travel policy. The external expertise, again, you can see they're the same, similar proof of payment, procurement, contracts, evidence of service being delivered, so forth. Our equipment budget line, again, same procedures in terms of the audit trail for that. The infrastructure and works budget line. Some projects under Northwest Europe would have maybe some substantial budget in infrastructure and works. So again, the same procedure, what's required there. So I hope you found that useful. If anybody's any questions, we can take some questions now. And again, that's our contact details there.